on incorporating visuals into your presentations. There's a lot of different types of visuals that you can use. You can refer to your textbooks for handouts and using objects. Timing is important, and how we use and display them are important, but these videos are focused specifically on incorporating PowerPoint into your presentation. So this first video is covering how many slides do we want to use, the 4 design principles that are common in just design, as well as using color. The second video is going to go over how to incorporate images into your PowerPoints, and we're also going to go over some of the rules for using text and graphs in your presentations. By the way, if you didn't know, as a student at TCC, you can download the whole Microsoft Office suite and have Word, PowerPoint, Excel directly from your MyTCC homepage. There's a link there with information, and you can get that software for free on multiple devices. So you might want to check that out. There's lots of benefits for using visuals. It helps audience memory and recall. It saves time. It adds interest. We love looking at images as audience members. Images we love. So when you have something really great to look at, it even takes our eyes off of you as the speaker, and it redirects the audience. So it actually helps us understand what you're saying. It can decrease your presentation time if you have a lot of material. This can help you keep more organized and keep you on track. And it adds to your credibility, because if you do them well, you've done it ahead of time, you look more organized and in charge. So how many visuals do you want to use? Personally, my recommendations are here on the left. I personally don't like title slides at all in a speech class, because we're trying to create intrigue with our attention getter, get you drawn in. And sometimes when you're trying to create a sense of mystery, when you have the answer on the title slide behind you, it ruins the attention getter. Now, every instructor is different, and in a lot of classes, you're not required to have an attention getter. If they want a title slide, by all means, you do a title slide. But I do not like them, mostly because they ruin your attention getter. And so I personally would avoid that. So you might look at one slide for your introduction as you're introducing your topic. Maybe one slide for each main point. Sometimes main points might be a little bit more complex. You might need a couple. And if you really think you need one, you might have one for your conclusion, but it's not always necessary. So this is a speech with a few visuals to help enhance and clarify what you're saying. This is not a PowerPoint presentation. Everything should not be on your slides. Back in the day when there was no computer, how many poster boards would you create as visuals or flip chart pages, right? So we are trying to enhance and clarify what the speaker is saying and show the ideas, but they are not your speaker notes, and you don't rely on them as your notes. If you have a lot of slides, you need to keep in mind you have to remember to change the slides, and sometimes y'all forget. And so I actually suggest you might write on your speaker notes, change slide or PPT, and highlight it or write it down in red, right? And practicing, you have to practice with your visuals so you can get familiar with using them and pointing them and referring the audience to them. So I think sometimes less slides is easier to remember. If you have 10 slides, it's too many for a 4 to 5 minute speech. Okay. So let's look at the design principles we want to use. This is by Robin Williams, the designer, not the actor comedian. So we're going to incorporate these into our PowerPoints. Contrast is avoiding similar elements. So we want dark and light, for example, right? Dark backgrounds, light writing, or vice versa. Then we get into repetition. That's repeating the same design elements. So the same fonts, the same color schemes. We don't want each slide to look like a different presentation. We want it to look like it's all one presentation. So if you're going to use dark teal as a title, color for your title, then you should use that on all of your slides. You really shouldn't be changing it. If you're going to use purple bullet points, then you should use purple bullet points on all of them. That would be repetition. Alignment is visually connecting the elements together. We also want to pay attention to vertical alignment. I mean, we're used to reading from left to right, and sometimes we like to center it. Sometimes we align it all on the left or all on the right, and that's fine. But we also want you to think about your vertical space. Don't scrunch everything up at the top. Use that vertical space. Add spacing in here so that it's sort of centered from top to bottom and looks like it's organized visually as far as alignment. And proximity is grouping like items together, not just randomly throwing things, intentionally placing items on a slide and grouping things together that need to be grouped. So here we have a plain business card. This is an example that we use in our business and professional communication class, and it's a very plain business card. And so you can think about how would you apply contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity to use this to improve this business card. So any ideas? Here's an example of using larger fonts, obviously, to increase the visual impact. Using your space. We don't want a lot of empty space on our slides or a lot of white space. We want to use our space. There was a lot more white space on the previous slide, on the blank, on the more boring business card. We are aligning everything here to the left. We're grouping items together. We love images, so I love that we put that on here. We have a little bit more contrast between the background. Okay, I'm not super fond of this light green color. Light green on beige doesn't really work well, but that's our example for now. We'll look at color next. But this is just one way. We will have student samples, PowerPoint samples to look at. And I will give you some advice on using those. So let's take a look at color. When we look at color, we're going to consider hue, saturation, and then some color tips. So keep in mind those principles of repetition and contrast throughout your PowerPoint slides. While I'm thinking about it, just because a template already exists in PowerPoint, it doesn't mean that it's good. I've seen backgrounds that are orange and brown, and they use dark brown writing on it, and that really does not look fabulous. The brown and orange is not enough contrast. So that's something to keep in mind, those principles, repetition and contrast, as you're using color. So we're going to define each one of these items on the subsequent slides. Hue. Hue is just another name for specific colors on your color wheel. If you didn't know, they're in design, and we can look at colors on a wheel, and there are complementary colors, etc. But these are all different colors, right? And so that's what we mean by hue. It's just a different color. Okay? When we talk about contrast, a really dark color with a light background, for example, dark writing and a light background. A lot of times y'all will put black writing on red. Well, black writing on red doesn't work. It's not enough contrast. So we want to really pay attention to the colors that we use and make sure that they are high contrast, really dark, really light. If I was using a blue background, I would use white writing. Okay. Saturation is the amount of color used. So full saturation, and if you have a really good monitor, this is easy to see. This back image here is what we call full saturation. The front image is lower in saturation. So when we're talking about saturation, it's more vivid, it's more bright. The low saturation would be a little bit more dull, a little bit more grayed out, if you will. So we like really vivid, bright colors full of saturation. And then we have different tips on using colors. For unrelated items, use different hues. For related items, sometimes different saturations of a single hue. Uh, when you're using figures, numbers, etc., we like really fully saturated colors. Background and text, make sure that there are stark contrasts there. What's called the black zone is making sure that you can clearly see the edges of letters, bullets, and figures. The sort of the glow and the glow effect with the writing doesn't work well on slides. So we want to be cautious of that. I love bold print almost on anything that you do. That's just one of my other free tips because it just helps it stand out and makes it a little bit stronger. So I recommend using bold print on just about everything as far as PowerPoint goes. All right, so you have the principles you need to apply, and you have a little bit more understanding on color, and we are going to explain how to use writing and graphs on your text and how to incorporate images on our next video.